Tonight, rising seas eat away at Alaska. Tax reform clears its first hurdle. And the Fellini of faith-based filmmaking.
Are you kind of like the white Tyler Perry?
Leanne Tweeden, a radio newscaster and former model and sports broadcaster, has accused Senator Al Franken of sexual misconduct during a USO tour in 2006. In a post she wrote for her radio station detailing the incidents, Tweeden says she felt disgusted and violated when Franken forcibly kissed her while rehearsing a skit he wrote.
I just felt like, he betrayed my trust, and obviously that is not what I wanted.
Tweeden also released a photo showing that Franken, quote, groped me without my consent while I was asleep. Franken initially released a short statement and then, seeming to reconsider, put out a much longer one, apologizing to Tweeden and his constituents and supporters. He called for a Senate ethics investigation into his own actions and said he would gladly cooperate. Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore repeated today that he's staying in the race. He also said that the sexual misconduct allegations levied against him by a growing number of women are part of a larger conspiracy.
This is an effort by Mitch McConnell and his cronies to steal this election from the people of Alabama, and they will not stand for it. They overcame $30 million and voted me in the primary, and now they're trying a different tactic.
In a statement today, the Alabama Republican Party stood by Moore, saying, quote, Alabamians will be the ultimate jury in this election, not the media or those from afar. For the first time, researchers say they were able to detect the brain disease CTE in a living patient. They scanned the brain of a retired NFL player while he was still alive and identified the presence of a protein called tau, which clumps and spreads in the brain in cases of CTE. It's associated with repeated trauma to the head. They confirmed the player did have the disease by examining his brain after he died, which is still the only way to definitively diagnose CTE. The results were published this month in the journal Neurosurgery. After more than a week of deliberations, the jury in the trial of Senator Bob Menendez said they couldn't reach a unanimous verdict on any of the 18 counts, and the judge declared a mistrial. The charges against Menendez included bribery, fraud, and conspiracy. The government alleges that the New Jersey senator and his co-defendant, a wealthy Florida eye doctor, participated in a bribery scheme between 2006 and 2013. Both men pled not guilty.
To those who were digging my political grave so that they could jump into my seat, I know who you are, and I won't forget you.
Prosecutors must now decide if they'll retry the case. By the end of this century, as many as 13 million Americans will be forced to move because of rising sea levels, flooding, and erosion. But even though this wave of climate migration is coming right toward us, the federal government has no plans for how to deal with it. And some parts of the U.S. are already losing ground to the sea. In Alaska, 31 villages, home to about 18,000 people, are in danger of disintegrating. And for one village, there's no time left.
Tonight, southwest wind 35 knots. Seas 15 feet.
West means the water will be higher than normal.
Thank you for calling the Alaska Weather Information Line.
I'm looking at the piece of land that looks like it broke off, but it might be the lowland over there.
No.
Don't know.
Della Carl lives in Newtok, a small native village of roughly 400 people on the western coast of Alaska.
We don't have much time. We don't want the high waters, especially when it's windy. Like last night, erosions much faster.
Usually, at this time of year, the ground is frozen solid, which would prevent storms like this one from eating away at the land. But it hasn't snowed yet. In the morning after the storm, Della assessed the damage.
Every time a piece of land breaks off when I'm staying over at my uncle's, I can hear it and I can feel it.
You can feel it. What do you mean by you can feel it?
The house shakes a little.
The house shakes.
At one point, a big chunk of land broke off, and it was felt and heard all across the village.
Because of climate change, the permafrost under Newtok has been melting and then eroding for years. Since the village was founded in the 1950s, it's lost nearly a mile of coastline. According to the Army Corps of Engineers, houses could begin to fall into the water within the year. There's 40 feet of land standing between the first house and the shoreline. During a storm in early October, Newtok lost 10 feet in just 4 days. Do you feel threatened by this?
Oh yeah, especially because I live so close. I think we have less than a year if the winds keep coming, if the rain keeps coming.
What happens if your uncle's house isn't livable anymore?
We would have to go somewhere else.
And where would you go?
Wherever we can.
In the 1950s, to comply with a law requiring educational facilities for Native children, the federal government built a school at the center of what is now Newtok.
Morning.
But in doing so, the government changed the culture forever. Native Alaskans, who used to be seasonally nomadic, became static and permanently settled by the coast. Nearly 75 years later, the school is the only building in the village with running water.
Now, I'm going to give you your chance to brush your teeth, so this group right here, go ahead.
And as more land erodes, it's also in danger. In 1996, the people of Newtok voted to move the entire village. 7 years later, they agreed on a piece of land 9 miles away on higher and sturdier ground called Murtarvik. And they've been trying to build that new village ever since. The one thing that's missing is money to actually finish it. The person in charge of coordinating Newtok's relocation is Romy Kadiente. How many houses do you have built?
We got about, and I would say about 4 right now, 5.
Why can't everybody from Newtok move here right now?
Funding is an issue. You know, we have state and federal agencies that are very, very supportive, but the funding is just not there.
Newtok's residents have spent years trying to get funding to relocate.
You guys got what you need?
So far, they've gathered about $40 million from multiple agencies. They've used that money to get started on construction.
Residents here take a lot of pride in building their own village.
The problem is, the funding they've received still falls short of the total amount they'd need, an estimated $130 million. In January of this year, FEMA denied Newtok's request for a major disaster declaration. The agency told Vice News that the funding the village requested was designed to address catastrophic damage occurring as a direct result of a specific disaster event. In short, erosion and permafrost melt happening over a number of years doesn't qualify. FEMA isn't the only agency that's reacted this way, and that's the crux of the problem. In the US, there is no state or federal system in place for relocating Americans displaced by climate change. For the 30 other Alaskan villages facing the same threat, Newtok's success or failure will set a precedent. The following week, Newtok's Village Council traveled to Anchorage to attend a meeting with representatives from 11 federal and state agencies, including the EPA and the Bureau of Indian Affairs.
Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started because it's 1:30 now. We've got a really full agenda. This is the Newtok Planning Group.
For those of you that haven't seen it,
Newtok's residents have been attending meetings to discuss the relocation for years.
This is a congressional issue because Congress has not envisioned a situation that Newtok is facing, the slow-moving disasters.
That day, the Village Council was determined to find out why a request for another FEMA grant, one that they hoped they might qualify for, hadn't been approved. Mike Wallery, Newtok's lawyer, sparred with Kim Stewart of Alaska Homeland Security.
And our understanding is that FEMA had approved funding and that the state never submitted the request.
The application was not complete, which is why we did not submit it to FEMA. The application was never
But you
accepted.
have not
by
explained why it was incomplete.
Right, which we can talk about. And
It's
and
been
we can give you
almost
an
2
automated
months.
No, in order to take care of American people, somebody's got to be changed, modified, make it better, make it work.
I don't know, we're not going to come up with an answer at this meeting right now, but I would like to propose that we have some side meetings in between the next planning group meeting that we have, but you're not going to be able to buy any more time past this year.
By the end of the meeting, the one thing that had become obvious is that U.S. policies haven't caught up to climate change yet. And for Newtok, that means there's still no clear path forward.
It's going to take millions of dollars to move Newtok.
Mm-hmm.
Why should that money be spent on moving a couple hundred people?
There's going to be a point in time where the village cannot sustain itself anymore. Mm-hmm. And what do you do with these people? Where do you take them? What happens to their identity? What happens to their culture? These are part of the U.S. people that needs to take care of. But not only that, what happens to the rest of us? If we cannot get this right, what happens to the rest?
The House of Representatives narrowly voted on Thursday to pass its version of a tax reform bill.
Bill is passed. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
Handing a big win to Speaker Paul Ryan and to a glowing Donald Trump. But the bill getting through the House doesn't necessarily mean it's much closer to becoming law.
Of the 205 members that voted against tax reform today, 13 were Republicans. Many of their GOP colleagues who voted yes have their reservations, but they're all hoping their worries will be washed away when the bill gets to what's called conference committee, or conference for short.
We're excited about going through the legislative process, going to conference, getting this done, making this bill even better.
So what is this alternate dimension known as conference? When the House and Senate pass different versions of a bill, members from both sides of the Capitol get together to try to work out the differences. Then that compromise bill has to be passed by both chambers. Republicans are betting that this is where they can ultimately come to some kind of consensus that can be signed by the president.
I am looking at the combination of the House and the Senate bill. And I think between the two of them, they've got all the elements of exactly what we need.
Sounds easy, right? Except like everything in this building, politics may get in the way. Like, for instance, the electoral politics of being from New York, New Jersey, or California. All but one of the Republicans who voted against the bill are from those states. They voted against it because the bill modifies a very popular state and local tax deduction that the highly taxed citizens of their districts like a lot.
There are New York and California Republicans who voted for this thing. What do you say to them? Are they just doing it just to get to conference to look like they're doing something?
Yeah, again, they have to. I can only explain my vote, and I voted because it was, to me, very damaging to Long Island in particular and New York in general. As far as California, they have to speak for themselves.
And even the Republicans who voted for it don't want to run on that in 2018. On the Senate side, their version of the bill presents even bigger problems. The Joint Committee on Taxation says that in the coming years, the Senate bill will raise taxes on those who make less than $75,000. And the wild card on the Senate side, the lack of politics in politics. It's hard to get senators to compromise on their principles when they're either not running for re-election or, in the case of Senator McCain, working on solidifying his legacy. And if two of those people raise their hands in objection, the Senate doesn't pass a bill and Republicans never get to conference in the first place. Which, as you recall, is exactly what happened with Obamacare repeal earlier this year. The House passed something, partied at the White House, Senate couldn't get it done, nothing happened. So while there was applause for Speaker Ryan on the floor of the House today, the GOP probably shouldn't be celebrating this early in the process.
Less than 48 hours after Zimbabwe's military detained President Robert Mugabe at his home, The longtime dictator was pictured today at a meeting in his office with military leaders, politicians, and an envoy from South Africa. But missing from the meeting was one of the key players in the political chaos, First Lady Grace Mugabe, who's also believed to be under house arrest. Being detained by the military is a dramatic change in power dynamics for someone who spent much of the last 30 years living the high life in a very poor country. Grace is 40 years younger than Mugabe. Their romance got started when she was working in the president's pool of typists, and his first wife Sally was dying. They got married 2 years after Sally's death, in a wedding that cost $4 million. Nelson Mandela was just one of the 4,000 guests.
She is a very pretty typist, largely uneducated, and with overweening ambition. She also likes pretty things, which means money.
The First Lady's taste for luxury goods, including a $200,000 diamond-encrusted headboard, earned her the nickname Gucci Grace. It wasn't just the retail indulgence that made Mrs. Mugabe deeply unpopular at home and around the world. She's been accused of assault multiple times, attacking photographers and maids. And this past August, she was accused of beating a model with an extension cord in a hotel in South Africa. Grace started taking steps on the political stage in 2014 when she was named head of the Women's League for the ruling ZANU-PF party. The position gave her a seat at the Politburo. She denied having grander aims.
Let me tell you, inini ndikumira pano. Semudzimai wa president wenyu. Semunhu wamakati munoda kuti atungamire madzimai. Ndobva ndagumira ipapo full stop nga. Handina chimwe chandiri kuda.
But earlier this month, she suggested that her husband could put her in charge of the entire country. Still, her perch has rested largely on the shoulders of one person.
Her power base is solely Robert Mugabe, and Mugabe is under house arrest. It's difficult right now for me to conceive of any scenario in which he will return to power in any meaningful way. That means Grace would be out in the cold.
Milan is the wealthiest city in Italy, but its thriving economy has also made it a target for brazen robberies and holdups. During one bad stretch between 2008 and 2011, more than 2,000 local businesses were robbed, 70% of them by organized criminal gangs. But the Milan police are fighting back against this old-school crime wave with a high-tech solution.
Pharmacies are the top choice for robbers in Milan, with soft security and lots of cash on hand. They represent more than 40% of the businesses targeted. Rosalia Natale's pharmacy has been robbed 5 times in 6 years.
How big of a problem is robbery here in Milan?
Perché con qualunque collega io parli hanno subito più di una rapina. Quindi penso che sia semplice, proprio come tipologia di rapina, arrivare dietro al banco e portare via quello che c'è. Poi siamo tutte donne in particolare. Se non c'è nessuno in farmacia ci si pensa, ci si sente un po' in pericolo.
A robber hit 2 pharmacies in Natale's neighborhood in recent weeks, but the Milan police think they've already identified the culprit. It's because of a predictive computer program called KeyCrime, created for the department by a rank-and-file police officer named Mario Venturi.
Prego. Thank you.
Questa è la stanza dove utilizziamo KeyCrime. Qui dentro siamo in 4 persone e qui dentro viene fatta tutta l'analisi sulle rapine che vengono commesse a Milano, i danni di esercizi commerciali e banche.
I've noticed this mural up here. Can you explain this? Why do you have it?
Questa è un murales che rappresenta il film famoso Point Break, una delle prime serie criminali in ambito televisivo. Serie criminali sono quelle che noi trattiamo in questo ufficio. Bellissimo film.
When Venturi was assigned to the property division in 2004, investigators had to try to solve crimes without the help of computers.
Qua vedi una cosa molto carina. Abbiamo una mappa che teniamo lì come ricordo, come punto fermo, cioè, che ci indica quello che facevamo una volta nel passato.
Over the next 4 years, Venturi enlisted the help of some programmer friends to design an algorithm to automate investigation. His premise was that information about past robberies could predict future ones. In 2008, Venturi convinced his bosses to put the software into action, and KeyCrime was born.
How did you feel when this technology that you'd made actually started working?
La prima volta, paradossalmente, è stata una delusione. Il crimine è avvenuto e la persona c'è scappata. C'è stato un attimo di disappunto, proprio di nervoso, perché non l'avevamo preso, ma immediatamente dopo abbiamo gioito perché abbiamo capito per la prima volta che potevamo essere in grado di prevedere dove un crimine potesse accadere.
Milan isn't the only city in the world to use policing software. The New York Police Department pioneered the practice during the 90s with CompStat, but KeyCrime is unique. It focuses on individuals rather than aggregate data to guide investigations. When a robbery is reported, Venturi and his team collect all possible information about the crime and its perpetrators.
Ok, quindi mi sta dicendo che quando è entrato aveva già l'arma in mano.
Some data points are obvious, like date, time and location. But using CCTV footage, the officers also make note of more specific details, like clothing, tattoos, and in which hand the weapon is used.
Ah, importante questo. Allora aspetti, quindi ha già l'arma in mano, la brandisce, ok, dice dammi soldi.
KeyCrime compares this information to its database of all criminal activity in Milan and links crimes with similarities. Venturi has just analyzed the latest string of pharmacy robberies.
Lo vedi qui? Abbiamo questo soggetto che ha compiuto 2 eventi criminosi, questo e questo, che sono dei negozi, sono delle farmacie. Attraverso l'analisi delle informazioni che abbiamo raccolto su questi crimini, abbiamo linkato questi 2 fatti e abbiamo costruito una serie criminale. Quindi l'applicativo ci permette di vedere dove questo gruppo criminale sta agendo.
KeyCrime's analysis tells the officers that the robber usually strikes pharmacies in this neighborhood between 4 and 7 p.m. on Wednesdays. A special team of officers, led by Chief Luca Izzo, will use the prediction to apprehend him.
Nel momento in cui noi abbiamo un'indicazione sul luogo, l'orario e sugli obiettivi che il soggetto ha intenzione di colpire o comunque che ha colpito, si mettono in campo degli equipaggi in borghese. Quindi se il soggetto decide di compiere una nuova rapina in quel quartiere, ci sono le pattuglie che lo arresteranno, gli equipaggi che lo arresteranno.
KeyCrime's detailed database has had a real impact on the robbery epidemic in Milan. The number of robberies in the city has decreased by 51%. The rate of solved cases has increased to 60%.
Do the criminals know that you're using KeyCrime? And if they do, have you noticed them trying to modify their behavior to perhaps try and beat the system?
Sì, certo. KeyCrime è conosciuto molto bene negli ambienti criminali. Per nostra fortuna, io che ho inventato KeyCrime avrei difficoltà ad ingannare KeyCrime.
David A.R. White is the co-founder of Pure Flix, and he's probably one of the most prolific and successful independent filmmakers you've never heard of.
Let me show you around here. There's a couple other kind of fun things. So we were on the set of Malibu Dan, the Family Man, and this is the Family Man's house.
White had a few small roles as an actor in the early 90s, but it was only after he got into the Christian movie game that he had his first real hit. That happened in 2014 with his movie God's Not Dead. It tells the story of a naive college student whose faith is challenged by a God-hating professor.
There is no God.
God's Not Dead was the #1 movie of 2014, a #1 live-action independent movie of 2014. Went on to become the 6th most profitable movie in cinema history.
You went from doing mainstream Hollywood stuff to doing something very different. How did you make that decision?
You know that saying, do what you know? And what I knew is I had grown up in the church. My dad was a Mennonite pastor. And so I had always loved Christian movies. There wasn't a lot of them, but every now and then we would get them on Sunday nights. And I had an appreciation for this niche that really didn't exist, but I felt like it should exist.
What's that?
The Christian faith genre. 150 million people go to church once a month. So obviously there's a hunger out there for positive, inspirational, spiritual entertainment. And it really didn't exist. And so I got into it early on because I knew the church, I knew the marketing, and that's kind of where Pure Flix came out of, is to serve that audience.
God's Not Dead was never a critical success, at least not in the mainstream. Financially, though, it was a game changer, and it attracted people who were interested in watching wholesome TV.
Hi, I'm David Arrowhite, co-founder and managing partner of Pure Flix Entertainment. Like you, our family is always looking for great movies and TV shows to share together.
And like you, we're often disappointed by the content on leading networks and subscription-based services.
Malibu Dan the Family Man is just one of 7 original series they've filmed since launching.
All right, here we go, nice and quiet.
$11 a month gets users access to thousands of hours of licensed Christian educational films, children's shows, and family sitcoms. Pure Flix now has 1.6 million unique visitors per month to its site. That's more users than streaming services like Showtime. You've probably never seen the founders of those companies on TV, but David likes to star in his own company's programming.
You know what he got? Zip!
Are you kind of like the white Tyler Perry?
No. I'd love to be the white Tyler Perry, but no.
A lot of what you're saying is kind of the focus is on things that are, uplifting, and these are family values and things. There are a lot of commonalities, I think, between what Muslims believe, what Jews believe, what Christians believe, of all stripes, I think.
Sure.
Would there be a home for all of these faiths on Pure Flix?
Maybe. It just doesn't matter what that content looks like. I can't say, oh yeah, totally, we're gonna do that. And the interesting thing is when you look at the pie of who actually is watching our content, we have Muslims watching it, we have Buddhists, we have Hindus, we have, all the Catholics, Protestants, like there's a whole there's a whole variety of different faiths that have been connected to what this is.
And so if there's people watching it, then will you then target them?
Maybe.
Pure Flix isn't the only platform that has religious content. You can buy religious movies on iTunes, and Netflix has a wide selection of Christian programming. But White says he's not really concerned about competition. Something that's happening now is companies are increasingly starting to segment and really target these really niche groups.
Yep.
Christian viewers, it's not even really a niche.
We haven't found that too much though, in the faith side. No, not at all. Which you would think that they would be doing it more. All of a sudden, all the studios started to open up their faith divisions. But for whatever reason, the faith divisions never stick around. They don't last that long.
Why is that?
Unless the people running those divisions truly understand the audience, there's a connection that's missing.
That's Vice News Tonight for Thursday, November 16th.